Minimum wage has changed, and in the process of its changing, a lot of questions have come up again about minimum wage. So I just want to give some points here for persons who may not be clear on how minimum wage applies. In the first instance, whilst we have a minimum wage in Trinidad and Tobago, the fact of the matter is we have a minimum range for persons who are covered under the Minimum Wage Act. So yes, there's a minimum wage, but in terms of how the law is applied, we have a minimum range of salary. And the minimum range is minimum wage or up to 1.5 times minimum wage. So in this instance, based on the change that has taken place, the minimum wage is now $20.50, and the persons who earn $20.50 or up to $30.75, which is half of 20, so 2050 plus half of 2050, which is $10.25, it becomes $30.75. So persons who earn between $20.50 and $30.75 per hour, they are now part of the minimum wage. They're covered under the minimum wage legislation. Now, how does that impact on you? Minimum standard of employment. 1, 10 days vacation once you complete 1 year service on the anniversary date. 2, 14 days paid sick leave in the calendar year, right? So there's another thing people don't understand. If the employee completes, let's say they make 6 months of employment, and it is the November of the calendar year, as of that date, they are now entitled to that 14 days sick leave. So the 6 months side of it is that the employee must complete 6 months of continuous employment before they become entitled to that, accessing that 14 days sick benefit. They're entitled to the access of the sick benefit. All right, let me just be clear about that too, because people tend to go crazy with that. The employer has the prerogative of asking for a medical certificate. The Minimum Wage Act says 2 days or less you're not required, or it actually says more than 2 days you're required to present a sick leave. And the Industrial Relations Act, Section 77, establishes that only a medical practitioner could determine the medical status of an employee. I'm paraphrasing here, so we have to be careful with this, because quite often people take the polarized position that if I take in 2 days or less, I'm not required to bring a medical certificate. The problem that you face is if your employer challenges your claim and decides to withhold the payment for the sick leave on the basis that the employer suspects that you may not have legitimately been sick, it will be your word against the employer. And if the employer could prove that you have a pattern of sick leave usage, then that suspicion could be validated, and therefore you will not have that access to that benefit. You will not be entitled to that access. So you need to be careful with these things. No, just to be clear, you cannot. Sick leave is not 2 weeks, which is equivalent to 10 days. A lot of employers have been practicing that 10 days sick leave per annum. That is not legal, right? Time and a half and double time on a public holiday for all persons who form part of the minimum wage bracket, and once they are being asked to work, and of course time and a half for all hours that go past their 8 hours. So these are just some basic guidelines. You can find this in the Minimum Wage Act. Download a copy and take a read of it. But coming back to what I started, the minimum wage category is between $20.50 and $30.75.